What would you do if you discovered your own sister had stolen your credit cards and was halfway to Vegas, living it up on your hard-earned money? Well, I found out exactly what I was capable of, and let me tell you, the revenge was sweeter than any jackpot she could have hit. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Jessica, and at 28, I thought I had my life pretty well figured out. I work as a cybersecurity specialist for a tech company in Austin, Texas, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. Maybe too responsible, looking back on it now. While my peers were out partying in college, I was already thinking about my future, building my credit score, and saving every penny I could. My family situation was complicated, to put it mildly. After my parents went through a messy divorce, 3 years ago, they both struggled financially. Dad moved to a small apartment across town and worked double shifts at a manufacturing plant just to make ends meet. Mom kept the house but could barely afford the payments on her teacher's salary. And then there was my younger sister, Brooklyn. Brooklyn was 25 but acted like she was still in high school. While I was climbing the corporate ladder and building a solid financial foundation, she was bouncing between part-time jobs, spending more time taking selfies than actually working. She had this carefree attitude that everyone seemed to find charming, but I could see right through it. She expected the world to hand her everything on a silver platter. Despite our differences, I loved my family and felt obligated to help them through their financial struggles. Every month, I'd transfer money to help Mom with the mortgage and slip Dad some cash when I knew he was struggling with his rent. I never made a big deal out of it because I knew they were both trying their best. My cybersecurity job paid well, and I lived modestly in a one-bedroom apartment, so I had the means to help. Brooklyn, on the other hand, had been living rent-free with Mom since the divorce. She contributed nothing to household expenses and somehow always had money for new clothes, expensive coffee, and weekend trips with her friends. When I asked her about getting a more stable job or helping out with bills, she'd just shrug and say she was figuring things out. Mom always defended her, saying Brooklyn was still young and needed time to find herself. The irony wasn't lost on me, that while I was the one actually supporting the family financially, Brooklyn was the one who got all the sympathy and understanding. I was expected to be the rock, the problem solver, the one who had everything together. Sometimes I wondered what would happen if I just stopped helping, but I pushed those thoughts away. Family is family, right? My financial setup was pretty sophisticated for someone my age. Working in cybersecurity has taught me the importance of monitoring everything closely. I had multiple credit cards with high limits that I used strategically to build credit and earn rewards, always paying them off in full each month. I also had a substantial emergency fund and was steadily contributing to my retirement accounts. My goal was to have enough saved to buy a house within the next 2 years. I kept detailed spreadsheets of all my expenses and monitored my accounts religiously through various banking apps. Every transaction was accounted for. Every penny had a purpose. This level of financial discipline had served me well, but it also meant I noticed immediately when something was off. Brooklyn had always been jealous of my financial stability, though she'd never admit it directly. She'd make little comments about how lucky I was to have such a good job, or how easy it must be to save money when you don't have any fun. She seemed to think money just magically appeared in my accounts, completely ignoring the years of hard work, studying, and sacrifice. That got me to where I was. Our relationship had become increasingly strained over the past year. I was tired of being the only one in the family who seemed to take responsibility seriously, and she was tired of hearing about it. We'd gotten into several arguments about her lack of direction and her entitled attitude. Mom would always step in to defend Brooklyn, saying I was being too hard on her and that not everyone could be as naturally successful as I was. The week before everything went wrong, Brooklyn had been acting strange. She was more secretive than usual, spending a lot of time on her phone and whispering conversations that would abruptly end when I walked into the room. She'd also been asking me odd questions about my work and my banking setup, claiming she was thinking about getting more serious about her own finances. I should have seen the red flags, but I was actually encouraged that she seemed to be taking an interest in financial responsibility for once. She'd asked me about credit cards, how they worked, what the limits were, and how quickly transactions went through. At the time, I thought she was finally ready to start building her own credit history. I even offered to help her apply for her first card and explain how to use it responsibly. She seemed grateful and interested, asking follow-up questions that made me think she was really listening for once. I had noticed she'd been paying more attention when I paid for things or used my cards, but I attributed it to her newfound interest in financial matters. She'd watch me enter my PIN at restaurants or comment on my different cards, asking which ones I used for what purposes. I was happy to explain my system, thinking I was finally being a good influence on her. Looking back, I realized she was studying me, learning my habits, memorizing details that would help her later. But at the time, I was just glad that my responsible little sister was finally rubbing off on my carefree younger sibling. I thought maybe our family dynamic was finally starting to improve. The night before my world turned upside down, Brooklyn had been unusually nice to me. She'd made dinner for Mom and me, something she rarely did, and had spent the evening asking about my job and my plans for the future. She seemed genuinely interested in my career, and even complimented me on how well I'd done for myself. It felt like we were finally connecting as sisters, and I went to bed feeling optimistic about our relationship. If I had known what she was planning, if I had any idea that her sudden interest in my life was actually her plotting against me, I would have locked up every credit card I owned and changed all my passwords immediately. But sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most, precisely because they're the ones you trust enough to let your guard down. That trust was about to cost me more than I could have ever imagined. But it was also going to teach Brooklyn a lesson she'd never forget. The next morning started like any other Wednesday. I woke up at 6:30 a.m., went through my usual routine of checking my phone for any work emergencies, and headed to the kitchen to make coffee. Brooklyn's bedroom door was closed, which wasn't unusual since she was never an early riser. Mom had already left for school, and the house was quiet. I grabbed my laptop and settled into my home office to start the day. Working in cybersecurity meant I was constantly monitoring threats, analyzing data, and staying ahead of potential breaches. Ironic, considering I was about to discover the biggest security breach in my own life. Around 10 a.m., I decided to check my banking apps during a quick break. This was part of my daily routine, a habit that had served me well over the years. I opened my primary checking account first, then moved to my credit cards. Everything looked normal until I got to my Chase Sapphire Reserve card. My heart stopped. There was a charge for $247 to Southwest Airlines, posted just 3 hours ago. Below that, another charge for $1,200 to the Bellagio, Las Vegas. My hands started shaking as I scrolled down to see more transactions. $800 at Nordstrom, $450 at Sephora, $300 at a high-end luggage store, all within the past 24 hours. My first thought was that my card had been compromised by hackers. In my line of work, I'd seen plenty of credit card fraud, and this looked like a classic case of someone going on a spending spree with stolen information. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The Nordstrom and Sephora purchases were made at locations in Austin, at the mall just 20 minutes from our house. I immediately called Chase to report the fraudulent charges. The customer service representative was professional and helpful, walking me through the recent transactions. But when she mentioned that the card had been used in person with the correct PIN for several of the purchases, my stomach dropped. "Ma'am, for security purposes, I need to verify some information. Can you confirm your current location?" "I'm at home in Austin, Texas. And do you have any authorized users on this account?" No, absolutely not. There was a pause. I'm showing that someone used your card at Austin Bergstrom International Airport this morning at 7:15 a.m. for a flight to Las Vegas. The charge was $2,847 for 2 tickets. 2 tickets? The room started spinning. I ended the call and immediately checked my other credit cards. My American Express had charges for a luxury hotel suite at Caesar's Palace. My Discover card showed purchases at expensive restaurants in Vegas from the previous evening, which was impossible since the charges were time-stamped after the flight. That's when I realized these weren't random fraud charges. Someone had planned this carefully, booking everything in advance and setting up an elaborate Vegas trip. And whoever it was had intimate knowledge of my cards, my PINs, and my daily routines. I ran to Brooklyn's room and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked harder. Still nothing. Against my better judgment, I opened the door and peered inside. The room was empty, but it looked like a tornado had hit it. Clothes were scattered. Everywhere, her dresser drawers were pulled out, and her closet was half empty. On her nightstand, I spotted something that made my heart sink. A handwritten note with my credit card numbers and expiration dates. My own sister had written down my financial information like she was planning a heist. I called her cell phone immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. My hands were shaking as I opened our family group chat and typed, "Brooklyn, where are you? We need to talk. Right now." No response. I called Mom at school, but she was in the middle of teaching and couldn't talk. I left a frantic voicemail explaining that Brooklyn had stolen my credit cards and was apparently in Las Vegas spending thousands of dollars. I asked her to call me back immediately. While waiting for Mom to call back, I did some detective work. I opened Brooklyn's laptop, which she'd left behind in her rush. Her browser history told the whole story. She'd been researching Vegas hotels, flights, and restaurants for weeks. She'd looked up information about credit card fraud, how long it takes for charges to be disputed, and even searched for how to use someone else's credit card without getting caught. The most damaging evidence was in her email. She'd been corresponding with someone named Marcus Rivera, and from their messages, it was clear they'd been planning this Vegas trip together for over a month. The emails were flirtatious and exciting, talking about all the fun they'd have and how they'd live like royalty for a long weekend. Marcus. I'd heard Brooklyn mention him a few times, but I'd never met him. From what I could gather from their emails, he was some guy she'd been dating casually, someone who worked in restaurant management and had expensive taste but no money to back it up. He'd apparently convinced her that she deserved a luxurious vacation and that I would never even notice the charges. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. "Your sister makes so much money," one of his emails read. "She probably won't even check her accounts for days. By the time she figures it out, we'll be back and you can just say it was a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. They thought stealing thousands of dollars from me was a misunderstanding. I found their itinerary saved in her documents folder. They'd booked a 3-day, 2-night stay at Caesar's Palace in a luxury suite. They had dinner reservations at Joel Robuchon, tickets to a Cirque du Soleil show, and plans to gamble at the high-limit tables. They'd even booked a couples massage at the spa and a helicopter tour of the Strip. The total estimated cost of their trip was over $15,000. $15,000 of my money that I'd worked years to save. My phone finally rang. It was Mom. "Jessica. Honey, I got your message. Are you sure about this? Maybe there's been some mistake." "Mom, I found everything. Her browser history, her emails, her handwritten notes with my credit card information. She's in Vegas right now with some guy named Marcus, living it up in a luxury suite that I'm paying for." There was a long silence. Oh my God, I can't believe she would do this. "But sweetie, she's your sister. Maybe we can work something out. When she gets back..." "Work something out?" Mom, she stole from me. This isn't borrowing $20. She's committed credit card fraud. This is a felony. Please don't call the police. Think about her future, her career prospects. One mistake shouldn't ruin her whole life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, even faced with undeniable evidence that Brooklyn had committed a serious crime against me. Mom's first instinct was to protect her and ask me to minimize the consequences. What about my future, Mom? What about the fact that I've been supporting this family for years and this is how she repays me? I know, honey, I know, but she's young and foolish. When she gets back, we'll all sit down and figure out how she can pay you back. Pay me back. As if this was just a loan she'd forgotten to ask permission for. I hung up the phone and sat in stunned silence. In the span of 2 hours, I'd discovered that my sister was a thief. My mother was more concerned about protecting the thief than supporting the victim, and I was out thousands of dollars funding a luxury vacation I'd never take myself. But then something shifted in my mind. I realized I wasn't powerless in this situation. Brooklyn might have stolen my credit cards, but she'd underestimated exactly who she was dealing with. I was a cybersecurity specialist with access to tools and knowledge that could turn this situation around completely. I looked at the clock. It was 11:30 a.m. in Austin, which meant it was 9:30 a.m. in Vegas. If their itinerary was accurate, they were probably just waking up in their stolen luxury suite, getting ready for a day of spending my money. It was time to remind my sister that actions have consequences, and that some people are much more dangerous to cross than others. I cracked my knuckles and opened my laptop. Game on, Brooklyn. The first thing I did was take a screenshot of everything. In cybersecurity, documentation is everything, and I needed evidence of every single fraudulent transaction, every email between Brooklyn and Marcus, and every detail of their elaborate scheme. I created a secure folder on my encrypted drive and began building what would essentially become a digital case file. As I compiled the evidence, my professional training kicked in. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was a sophisticated fraud operation that needed to be dismantled systematically. Brooklyn and Marcus had made one critical error. They'd underestimated their target. I pulled up the real-time transaction monitoring system I used for work. One of the perks of working in cybersecurity was having access to advanced tracking tools that could monitor financial activities across multiple platforms. Within minutes, I had a complete picture of their spending pattern. They'd started small the night before. A $200 dinner at a steakhouse, $150 in drinks at a casino bar, $75 for valet parking. Classic criminal behavior. Testing the waters to see if the cards worked before making bigger purchases. This morning, they'd gotten bolder. A $500 breakfast at Gordon Ramsay Hell's Kitchen, $800 in casino chips, and a $1,200 shopping spree at the Forum Shops. But here's what they didn't know about me. I had real-time alerts set up on all my accounts, and I could see exactly where and when each transaction was happening. More importantly, I had the ability to freeze accounts, dispute charges, and even track the physical location of card usage through merchant identification systems. I opened a new browser window and logged into my bank's fraud protection portal. Most people don't know this exists, but as a cybersecurity professional, I had access to advanced account controls that regular customers never see. I could set spending limits, geographic restrictions, merchant category blocks, and even temporary holds that would appear legitimate to avoid suspicion. My plan began to form. Instead of immediately canceling all the cards and ruining their trip, in one swift move, I was going to make this a slow, methodical torture. I wanted them to feel the same helplessness and betrayal that I'd felt when I discovered their theft. First, I set up geographic spending limits on all my cards. Any transaction outside of Texas would now require additional verification that would never come. But I timed the restrictions to activate in exactly 2 hours, giving them just enough time to feel secure before the trap snapped shut. Next, I accessed the merchant category controls. I blocked all entertainment purchases, luxury goods, and high-end restaurant transactions. They could still buy basic necessities like food and gas, but their lavish lifestyle was about to come to a screeching halt. Then came psychological warfare. I created a temporary email account and used their detailed itinerary against them. I sent anonymous tips to hotel security at Caesar's Palace about suspicious credit card activity in their room number. I contacted the restaurants where they had reservations and reported that stolen cards might be used for payment. But my masterpiece was what I did with their social media. Brooklyn had been posting constantly since arriving in Vegas. Photos of their suite, their fancy dinner, their expensive shopping bags. She was documenting her crime spree for the world to see. I screenshot every post, every story, every tagged location. This wasn't just evidence. It was a real-time confession. I found Marcus's social media profiles through Brooklyn's posts. This guy was a piece of work, posting photos of luxury items he clearly couldn't afford, talking about living the high life and making moves. His employment history showed a string of restaurant jobs, none lasting more than 6 months. This was someone who'd convinced my sister to commit a felony so he could pretend to be wealthy for a weekend. The more I learned about Marcus, the angrier I became. His previous social media posts showed him pulling similar schemes with other women. There were photos of expensive dinners and hotel rooms with different girls, always at places way above his pay grade. Brooklyn wasn't his first victim. She was just his latest mark. I dug deeper into his background using professional databases available through my work. Marcus Rivera, 29 years old, had a history of minor financial infractions, bounced checks, unpaid credit cards, even a small claims court judgment for not paying rent. This guy was a professional user, and my sister had walked right into his trap. Armed with this information, I called my friend Derek, who worked in hotel security in Las Vegas. We'd connected through a cybersecurity conference, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped his company recover from a data breach. Derek, I need a huge favor. My sister and her boyfriend are in Vegas using stolen credit cards, my stolen credit cards. They're staying at Caesar's Palace, and I need someone to keep an eye on them. Derek was intrigued. What kind of surveillance are we talking about? Nothing. Illegal. Just make sure hotel security is aware that room 4237 might be using fraudulent payment methods. Maybe check their IDs a little more carefully. Ask some additional questions about how they're paying for extras. I can make that happen. Want me to coordinate with other properties too? Absolutely. They have reservations at Bellagio, Wynn, and MGM Grand over the next 2 days. While Derek worked his magic on the Vegas end, I turned my attention to the financial nuclear option. I had the power to freeze all my accounts immediately, but that would end the game too quickly. Instead, I decided to create what I called death by 1,000 cuts. I set up automated decline triggers that would activate randomly throughout their trip. Sometimes their card would work, sometimes it wouldn't. I programmed it to be particularly aggressive during high-value transactions. Anything over $500 would have an 80% chance of being declined. This would create maximum chaos and embarrassment without completely cutting off their ability to survive. The beauty of this approach was psychological. They'd never know if a decline was due to fraud protection, network issues, or merchant problems. They'd spend their entire trip anxious and confused, never able to fully enjoy the stolen luxury they thought they'd secured. I also activated real-time spending alerts that would flood Brooklyn's phone with notifications every time they tried to use my cards. Each alert would show the transaction amount, merchant name, and my account balance. I wanted her to be constantly reminded that she was stealing my hard-earned money. My final preparation was legal. I called my attorney, Patricia Chen, who specialized in financial crimes. I'd worked with her on some cybersecurity cases, and she knew how to handle fraud investigations. Jessica, this is definitely criminal fraud, and with the amount involved, it's a felony. Do you want to press charges? Not yet. I want to give them a chance to make this right first, but I want everything documented properly in case we need to take legal action. Patricia helped me file official fraud reports with all 3 credit card companies and prepared the paperwork for potential criminal charges. She also advised me on how to document everything to ensure the strongest possible case if Brooklyn and Marcus refused to take responsibility. By 2 p.m., my trap was set. In exactly 30 minutes, their Vegas paradise would start crumbling around them, and they'd have no idea why. They thought they were dealing with their naive, generous victim who would just absorb the loss and move on. They were about to learn that they'd messed with the wrong person. I made myself a cup of coffee, opened my real-time transaction monitoring system, and settled in to watch the show. This was going to be better than any Vegas entertainment they could have bought with my money. At exactly 2:30 p.m. Austin time, my automated systems activated. I watched my computer screen like it was the best reality show ever produced, tracking every attempted transaction in real time. The first decline happened within minutes. Brooklyn tried to buy a $300 purse at Louis Vuitton in the Forum shops. Declined. The system showed her trying the card 3 times before giving up. I could practically see the confusion on her face. Through the transaction logs. My phone buzzed with a text from Brooklyn. "Jess, something's wrong with your Chase card. It declined at the store. Can you call the bank?" I ignored it and kept watching. 20 minutes later, Marcus attempted to put $1,000 on a blackjack table at Caesar's Palace. Declined. Then he tried my American Express. Declined. Finally, he attempted to use my Discover card for $500. Declined. The beauty of my system was that it wasn't declining everything, just high-value luxury purchases. When they tried to buy a $15 bottle of water from a vending machine, it went through perfectly. This kept them guessing and prevented them from immediately realizing they'd been caught. Derek called me from Vegas with an update. "Your girl and her boyfriend just spent 20 minutes arguing with the concierge about their card getting declined for spa services. Security is keeping a close eye on them now. The boyfriend is getting pretty agitated." Perfect. What's their body language? Like? She's panicked, constantly on her phone. He's pacing around the lobby, checking his wallet every few seconds. They look like people whose world is falling apart. I felt a surge of satisfaction. They were experiencing the same anxiety and helplessness I'd felt that morning when I discovered their theft. By 4 p.m. Vegas time, the real chaos began. They'd attempted 17 different transactions, and my system had declined 12 of them. The pattern was driving them insane. Small purchases worked fine, but anything over $200 was getting rejected. Brooklyn called me directly. I let it go to voicemail. "Jessica, something is seriously wrong with your cards. We're stuck in Vegas and nothing is working. The hotel is asking questions about our payment method and I'm starting to panic. Please call me back immediately." I saved the voicemail as evidence and continued monitoring their movements. Through the merchant tracking system, I could see they'd left Caesar's Palace and were walking around the strip, probably trying different vendors to see if the problem was location-specific. At 4:45 p.m., they attempted to pay for dinner at a mid-range restaurant. My system approved the $89 charge, letting them eat but keeping them confused about what was happening with the larger purchases. Then came my favorite part of the entire operation. At 6:15 p.m., they tried to pay for their Cirque du Soleil tickets, a $400 purchase that I'd been particularly looking forward to blocking. The decline happened right at the box office, with a long line of people behind them watching the rejection unfold. Derek texted me. "Security just informed me that your targets caused a scene at the Bellagio box office. They're starting to attract attention from multiple properties now." My phone rang again. This time it was Mom. "Jessica," Brooklyn called me crying. "She says all your cards are malfunctioning and they're stranded in Vegas. Can't you help them out?" "Stranded?" "Mom, they're not stranded. They stole my money to go on an unauthorized vacation. The cards aren't malfunctioning. I'm protecting my assets from thieves. But honey, she's your sister. She's scared and doesn't know what to do. She should have thought about that before committing credit card fraud. Actions have consequences. Please, just fix whatever you did to the card so they can get home safely. They have return tickets that were already paid for before I activated the security measures. They can come home anytime they want. They just can't continue their luxury. Crime spree on my dime. I hung up and immediately got another call from Brooklyn. This time I answered. Jessica, thank God. Something is wrong with all your cards. We're trying to pay for things and they keep getting declined. The hotel is asking weird questions and I think they suspect something. I let her panic for a few seconds before responding. Brooklyn, where exactly are you? We're in Vegas. I told you your cards aren't working and we don't know what to do. Let me ask you a different question. When exactly did you get my permission to go to Vegas? Silence. And when did I give you authorization to use my credit cards for this trip? More. Silence. Brooklyn, I know everything. I found your emails with Marcus, your browser history, your handwritten notes with my card information. I know you've been planning this for weeks. Jessica, I can explain. No, you can't. There's no explanation for theft. There's no excuse for betraying the person who's been supporting our family financially for years. Please, just let us enjoy the rest of the trip and we'll figure out how to pay you back when we get home. I almost laughed. Let you enjoy it? Brooklyn, you're not enjoying anything on my money anymore. Every card you have is flagged for fraud. Every hotel on the Strip has been notified about suspicious activity. You're done. What do you mean we're done? We still have tomorrow and Friday. You have return tickets for Sunday. I suggest you use them early because your vacation just ended. You're being ridiculous. It's just money. Just money? Brooklyn, you stole $15,000 from me. That's not just money. That's a felony. I could hear Marcus in the background, arguing with someone, probably hotel staff. Jessica, please. Marcus says if we don't pay for the suite tonight, they'll kick us out. We have nowhere to go. Then I guess you should have planned better before you decided to become criminals. We're not criminals. We're family. Family doesn't steal from family, Brooklyn. Family doesn't lie and scheme and commit fraud against the people who love them. I heard her start crying, and for a moment I almost felt bad. Almost. Look, here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack your bags, check out of that stolen luxury suite, and get on the next flight home. When you get back, you're going to sit down with me and Mom and figure out how you're going to pay back every single penny you stole. And if we don't? Then I called the FBI. Credit card fraud across state lines is a federal crime, Brooklyn. You could go to prison for this. The line went quiet, except for her crying and the background noise of Vegas chaos. You have 2 hours to check out of Caesar's Palace before I call hotel security myself. Choose wisely. I hung up and immediately called Derek. Derek, it's Jessica. I just spoke to my sister. Can you make sure they actually check out within the next 2 hours? Absolutely. What if they refuse? Then we escalate to law enforcement. I have all the documentation we need. Understood. I'll keep you posted. I leaned back in my chair and looked at my transaction monitoring screen. No new attempts in the past 30 minutes. The spending spree was over. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably Marcus. Your sister told me what you did. This is insane. We'll pay you back, just fix the cards. I blocked the number without responding. Another text. From Brooklyn. Fine. We're checking out, but this isn't over. I smiled and typed back. You're absolutely right. It's not over until every penny is repaid with interest. See you Sunday. The trap had worked perfectly. Now came the hardest part, making sure they learned from this experience instead of just resenting me for stopping their crime spree. Derek confirmed at 8:47 p.m. Vegas time that Brooklyn and Marcus had checked out of Caesar's Palace. According to hotel security, they'd looked defeated and embarrassed as they wheeled their expensive luggage through the lobby. The concierge had asked pointed questions about their early departure, and several staff members had taken note of their room number for future reference. They tried to book a cheaper room at a different hotel, Derek informed me over the phone. But word travels fast in this town. Most of the major properties have flagged them as potential fraud risks. They ended up at some rundown motel off the strip. The mental image of Brooklyn and Marcus going from a luxury suite at Caesar's Palace to a sketchy roadside motel filled me with a satisfaction I didn't know I was capable of feeling. This was justice in its purest form, but the real drama was just beginning. Over the next 18 hours, my phone became a battlefield of desperate messages, guilt trips, and increasingly frantic phone calls from various family members. Friday. Morning brought a call from my Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, who lived in Dallas. Jessica, your mother called me in tears last night. She says you've abandoned Brooklyn in Las Vegas and won't help her get home. How could you do that to your own sister? I realized Mom had been working the phones, painting me as the villain in this story while conveniently leaving out the part where Brooklyn had committed multiple felonies. Aunt Carol, let me ask you something. If someone stole your credit cards and spent thousands of dollars on a luxury vacation without your permission, what would you do? Well, that's different. Brooklyn is family. Family members who steal from you are still thieves, Aunt Carol. The DNA doesn't change the crime. I spent the next hour fielding similar calls from various relatives who'd only heard Mom's version of events. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Initial outrage at my cruelty, followed by uncomfortable silence when I explained what Brooklyn had actually done. My cousin Michael was the only one who supported me. Good for you, he said when I told him the full story. Brooklyn's been getting away with irresponsible behavior for years because everyone makes excuses for her. Maybe this will finally teach her that actions have consequences. Friday afternoon brought the call I'd been expecting. Brooklyn and Marcus had apparently spent their last night in Vegas at a Motel 6, surviving on fast food because they couldn't afford restaurant meals without my stolen credit cards. They'd managed to change their flight to leave Vegas early, arriving back in Austin Friday evening instead of Sunday. Jessica, we're at the airport in Austin, Brooklyn said when she called. We need to talk. We certainly do. Come to my apartment at 8 p.m. And Brooklyn? Bring Marcus. He's part of this conversation now. He doesn't want to get involved in family drama. He became involved the moment he helped you plan this theft. 8 p.m. Don't be late. I spent the afternoon preparing for the confrontation. I printed out every piece of evidence I'd collected, the email chains between Brooklyn and Marcus, her browser history showing weeks of planning, screenshots of their social media posts documenting the stolen vacation, and a complete breakdown of every fraudulent charge. I also called Patricia Chen, my attorney, and asked her to join us via video call. I wanted Brooklyn and Marcus to understand the serious legal implications of what they'd done. At exactly 8 p.m., there was a knock on my door. Brooklyn looked exhausted and sunburned, her expensive Vegas shopping bags conspicuously absent. Marcus stood beside her, wearing wrinkled clothes and avoiding eye contact. The contrast between their current appearance and their glamorous social media posts from 2 days earlier was striking. Sit down, I said, gesturing to my living room. We need to have a conversation about theft, consequences, and how you're going to make this right. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Look, this is between you and your sister. I shouldn't be here. You absolutely should be here, Marcus. You helped plan this theft. You benefited from my stolen money. You're equally responsible for what happened. I opened my laptop and began displaying the evidence. Brooklyn's face grew paler with each screenshot, each email, each transaction record. I documented everything, I explained. The planning, the execution, the spending, even your social media posts bragging about your stolen luxury vacation. This isn't a family dispute anymore. This is a criminal case. Jessica, we never meant to hurt you, Brooklyn said weakly. We just wanted to have some fun. Fun? You wanted to have fun with $15,000 of my money? Money I worked years to save? Money I've been using to support our family while you contributed nothing? Marcus finally spoke up. We planned to pay you back. Really? With what money, Marcus? According to my research, you've never held a job for more than 6 months. You have outstanding debts, unpaid rent judgments, and a history of financial irresponsibility. What exactly was your repayment plan? He couldn't answer because there had never been a repayment plan. This had been a purely selfish crime with no thought given to the consequences or the victim. I connected Patricia Chen to the video call. I'd like you both to meet my attorney, Patricia Chen. She specializes in financial crimes. Patricia's professional demeanor immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. Good evening. I've reviewed the evidence Jessica provided, and I want to make sure you both understand the legal situation you're facing. She explained that they had committed multiple felonies: credit card fraud, identity theft, and wire fraud. The total amount involved made these federal crimes with potential prison sentences of up to 10 years. However, Patricia continued, Jessica has asked me to explore alternatives to criminal prosecution, provided you're willing to take full responsibility and make complete restitution. I took over from there. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign a legal agreement acknowledging that you committed theft and fraud. You're going to agree to pay back every penny with 20% interest. And you're going to do it according to a payment schedule that I determine. 20% interest? Brooklyn protested. That's ridiculous. That's less than what you'd pay in legal fees and fines if this goes to court, Patricia interjected. Consider it a generous settlement offer. I slid a contract across the table that Patricia had prepared. You have 2 choices. Sign this agreement and work out a payment plan, or I file criminal charges tomorrow morning. Federal charges, Brooklyn. This isn't a municipal court. This is the FBI. Marcus read through the contract carefully. What if we can't make the payments? Then the agreement becomes void, and I proceed with criminal prosecution. But I've structured the payment plan. To be reasonable, $50 per week from each of you for the next 3 years. 3 years? Brooklyn looked shocked. You stole $15,000 plus interest. 3 years of $50 weekly payments is actually getting off easy. The alternative is 3 to 10 years in federal prison. I could see them doing the math in their heads. $50 a week for 3 years was $7,800 each, totaling $15,600. Enough to cover the theft plus interest. And there's one more condition, I added. Brooklyn, you're moving out of Mom's house within 30 days. You're 25 years old, and it's time you learn to support yourself instead of freeloading off family members. Where am I supposed to go? That's your problem to solve. Get a full-time job, find roommates, figure it out like every other adult in the world. Marcus signed the contract first, probably realizing he had no leverage in this situation. Brooklyn hesitated for several minutes, reading every line twice, but eventually signed as well. Smart choice, Patricia said. I'll file the original with the court and provide copies to all parties. Remember, this agreement is legally binding. Any default on payments or violation of terms will result in immediate criminal prosecution. After they left, I sat in my apartment feeling a mixture of exhaustion and vindication. The immediate crisis was over, but the real test would be whether they actually followed through on their commitment to make things right. I had effectively turned my sister and her accomplice into my debtors for the next 3 years, with the threat of federal prison hanging over their heads if they defaulted. It wasn't the outcome I'd wanted when I woke up Wednesday morning, but it was justice nonetheless. The first week after the contract signing was surprisingly quiet. Brooklyn made her initial $50 payment on schedule, transferring the money through Venmo with a note that simply said, Payment $1.156. Marcus did the same, though his payment came with a longer message about how he was learning from his mistakes and committed to making things right. I thought maybe the shock of nearly facing federal charges had actually taught them both a lesson. I was wrong. On Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after they'd returned from Vegas, I received a call from Chase Bank's Fraud Investigation Department. The representative, a woman named Sandra Martinez, had some disturbing news. Ms. Thompson, we've completed our investigation into the unauthorized charges on your account. During our review, we discovered additional fraudulent activity that predates the Las Vegas incident. My blood ran cold. What kind of additional activity? Over the past 4 months, there have been numerous small charges that appear to be unauthorized. Gas stations, grocery stores, restaurant deliveries, subscription services. The amounts were small enough that they didn't trigger our automatic fraud detection, but the pattern suggests systematic unauthorized use. She read off a list of charges that made my head spin. $30 here, $50 there, sometimes multiple charges in a single day. When she finished, the total came to an additional $3,200 in theft that I hadn't even noticed. The charges all occurred in the Austin area, and many of them used your PIN, which suggests the perpetrator had intimate knowledge of your account information. I thanked Sandra and immediately pulled up my own transaction history for the past 4 months. She was right. There were dozens of small charges I'd overlooked because they seemed reasonable at first glance. A $35 grocery store purchase here, a $25 gas station charge there. But when I mapped them against my actual activities, none of them matched my spending patterns. Brooklyn hadn't just planned the Vegas trip. She'd been systematically stealing from me for months, taking small amounts that she thought I wouldn't notice. This changed everything. I called Patricia Chen immediately. We have a problem. Brooklyn's theft wasn't a one-time Vegas incident. She's been stealing from me for months. How much additional theft are we talking about? Over $3,000 in small charges over 4 months. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Jessica, this changes the legal landscape significantly. Systematic theft over an extended period shows premeditation and pattern behavior. This isn't a moment of poor judgment. This is ongoing criminal activity. What does that mean for our contract? The contract only covers the Vegas charges. This additional theft isn't addressed in our agreement, which means you have grounds for separate criminal charges. I felt the anger building again. Brooklyn hadn't just betrayed me once with the Vegas trip. She'd been betraying me systematically, for months while I was working to support our family. Every family dinner where she'd sat across from me, knowing she was stealing from me. Every time I'd helped with household expenses while she was secretly funding her lifestyle with my money. That evening, I drove to Mom's house for an unscheduled confrontation. I found Brooklyn in her room, packing boxes. Apparently she was actually planning to move out as required by our contract. We need to talk, I said from her doorway. I'm packing, just like you demanded. I found a room to rent with some girls from my yoga class. Yoga class that you paid for with my stolen money, I'm assuming? She looked up, confused. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and showed her the list of fraudulent charges from the past 4 months. Chase Bank completed their fraud investigation. They found an additional $3,200 in unauthorized charges, all small amounts, all using my PIN, all in Austin. The color drained from Brooklyn's face. Jessica, I can explain. You've been stealing from me for 4 months, Brooklyn. 4 months of systematic theft while I was paying Mom's mortgage and helping Dad with his rent. While I was supporting this family, you were robbing me. Sat down heavily on her bed, surrounded by half-packed boxes. It wasn't like that. I just needed help sometimes, and I knew you had money. You knew I had money because I was working 60-hour weeks to earn it while you were doing yoga and posting Instagram photos. I was going to pay you back. When? You've been unemployed. For 6 months. You had no income and no plan to get income. You were just taking my money and hoping I wouldn't notice. I could see her trying to formulate an excuse, but there wasn't one. This wasn't a moment of weakness or poor judgment. This was calculated, ongoing theft from the person who'd been supporting her. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. Our original contract is void. You've violated the fundamental premise by concealing additional theft. You have 24 hours to come clean about every single unauthorized charge, or I file criminal charges for all of it. But I already signed the contract. We had a deal. The deal was based on the Vegas theft. You failed to disclose months of additional crimes. That's called fraud, Brooklyn, and it voids our agreement. I left her sitting in her room with her boxes and drove straight to Marcus's apartment. If Brooklyn had been stealing for months, I needed to know if he'd been involved in the systematic theft or just the Vegas finale. Marcus lived in a run-down complex on the east side of Austin. When he answered the door, he looked surprised to see me. "Jessica? What are you doing here?" "We need to talk about Brooklyn's theft history." I could see the confusion on his face was genuine. "What is the history of theft?" I explained about the 4 months of systematic stealing. Marcus's reaction told me everything I needed to know. He'd been unaware of Brooklyn's long-term criminal activity. "She told me the Vegas thing was a one-time idea," he said, shaking his head. "She said she'd never done anything like that before and just wanted to have one amazing weekend. So you thought it was okay to help her steal thousands of dollars, as long as it was her first time?" Marcus looked ashamed. "When you put it like that, it sounds terrible. But she made it seem like you were this rich workaholic who wouldn't even notice the money was gone." "I notice every dollar, Marcus. I work in cybersecurity. Monitoring and protecting assets is literally what I do for a living. I'm starting to realize Brooklyn lied to me about a lot of things. That was an understatement." Over the next hour, Marcus revealed details about their relationship that painted Brooklyn in an even worse light. She'd told him I was making over $200,000 a year, and that our family was wealthy. She'd claimed I was paying for everything out of guilt over being the successful sister, and that I actually wanted to support her lifestyle. She said you felt bad about having so much money while she struggled, so you didn't mind when she borrowed things. Borrowed? "Marcus, she stole from me. There's no borrowing without permission." The more we talked, the more I realized that Brooklyn had manipulated Marcus almost as much as she'd manipulated me. She'd painted herself as the victim of an unfair family dynamic, and me as someone who owed her financial support. But Marcus's ignorance about the systematic theft didn't absolve him of the Vegas crime. He'd still knowingly participated in using stolen credit cards, even if he'd believed Brooklyn's lies about my supposed willingness to support her extravagant lifestyle. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "That depends on Brooklyn. If she comes clean about everything and agrees to make full restitution for all the theft, I might consider maintaining our payment agreement. If she continues lying and hiding things, I press criminal charges for the entire amount." When I got home, I found 3 missed calls from Brooklyn and a series of increasingly desperate text messages. "Jessica, please don't file charges. I'll tell you everything. I found records of all the charges. I'll pay back every penny. Please call me back. I'm ready to be completely honest." I didn't call her back that night. I wanted her to spend the night wondering if she'd wake up to federal agents at her door. It was time for Brooklyn to experience the anxiety and uncertainty she'd been putting me through for months. The next morning, Brooklyn was waiting outside my apartment building when I left for work. She looked like she hadn't slept, clutching a manila folder against her chest. "Jessica, I have everything. Every charge, every transaction. I kept records because I was planning to pay you back." "You kept records of your own theft?" I knew it was wrong, but I kept telling myself it was temporary. "I thought I'd get a good job and pay you back before you noticed." She handed me the folder. Inside were handwritten lists of charges, dates, amounts, and even explanations for each theft. It was like a criminal's confession letter, meticulously documenting 4 months of systematic stealing. The total came to $3,247 in additional theft beyond the Vegas charges. Combined with the original $15,000, Brooklyn had stolen over $18,000 from me. "This changes everything, Brooklyn. You're not just a sister who made a mistake. You're a habitual thief who's been systematically stealing from the person supporting your family." I know I messed up everything. but I'm ready to make it right now. Looking at her standing, there with her confession folder, I realized this was the first time in our adult lives that Brooklyn was taking full responsibility for her actions. No excuses, no blame shifting, no asking Mom to intervene on her behalf. But accountability was just the first step. The real question was whether someone who'd been lying and stealing for months could actually change, or if this was just another manipulation to avoid consequences. Standing outside my apartment building with Brooklyn's confession folder in my hands, I had to make a decision that would affect both our lives permanently. The easy path would be to press charges and let the legal system handle everything. The harder path was to give her one final chance to prove she could change. Brooklyn, this folder doesn't fix what you did. It just documents how extensive your theft really was. I know, but I want to make it right. I'll get a real job, I'll pay back every cent with interest, and I'll never ask you for anything again. I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation and entitlement that had characterized her behavior for years. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before: genuine remorse and fear of real consequences. If I agree to work with you, instead of pressing charges, the terms are going to be completely different from our original contract. Are you prepared for that? She nodded quickly. Whatever it takes. Over the next week, Patricia Chen and I crafted a new agreement that reflected the true scope of Brooklyn's crimes. The total amount owed was $18,247 plus 25% interest, bringing the final figure to $22,808. Instead of the original 3-year payment plan, Brooklyn would have 5 years to make full restitution. But money wasn't the only consequence. The new contract included strict behavioral requirements that would fundamentally change how Brooklyn lived her life. First, she had to maintain steady employment with at least 35 hours per week. If she lost a job, she had 2 weeks to find new employment, or the contract would be void and I'd file criminal charges. Second, she had to attend weekly financial counseling sessions with a certified credit counselor. The sessions were designed to teach her basic money management, budgeting, and the real-world consequences of financial irresponsibility. Third, she was prohibited from having any credit cards, loans, or lines of credit for 3 years. If she needed to make a large purchase, it had to be paid for in cash that she'd saved specifically for that purpose. Fourth, she had to submit monthly financial statements showing her income, expenses, and savings. This wasn't just about ensuring she could make her payments to me. It was about forcing her to be accountable for every dollar she earned and spent. The most significant change was a clause requiring her to write a letter to Dad explaining what she'd done and offering to help with his expenses once she'd paid off her debt to me. For years, I'd been supporting both Mom and Dad, while Brooklyn contributed nothing. It was time for her to understand what family responsibility actually meant. Marcus signed a separate but similar agreement. Since he'd been unaware of the systematic theft and had only participated in the Vegas portion, his debt was $7,500 plus interest, totaling $9,375. His payment plan was structured over 3 years instead of 5. The first 3 months of the new arrangement were rocky. Brooklyn struggled to find steady work, bouncing between temporary positions and part-time jobs. She missed 2 payments in month 2, and I seriously considered voiding the contract and filing charges. But something changed in month 4. Brooklyn landed a full-time position as an administrative assistant at a medical clinic. The job required her to manage patient scheduling, handle insurance paperwork, and maintain detailed records, skills that forced her to develop the organizational abilities she'd always lacked. More importantly, the job paid well enough that she could afford her own studio apartment, make her payments to me, and still have money left over for modest entertainment and savings. For the first time in her adult life, Brooklyn was completely financially independent. The transformation wasn't just financial. Working full-time in a professional environment changed Brooklyn's entire perspective on money and responsibility. She started taking pride in her work, earning positive reviews from her supervisors, and even receiving a small raise after 6 months. Her weekly financial counseling sessions were also having an impact. Brooklyn learned to create budgets, track expenses, and set financial goals. The counselor, a woman named Dr. Rebecca Torres, helped Brooklyn understand how her previous financial irresponsibility had affected not just me, but our entire family. For the first time, I realized how much pressure Jessica was under. Brooklyn told me during one of our monthly check-ins, she was working so hard to support everyone while I was just taking and taking without any consideration for what it was costing her. Meanwhile, Marcus was struggling more with his obligations. He'd found work as a restaurant manager, but his irregular schedule and tendency to spend impulsively made it difficult for him to maintain consistent payments. By month 8, he'd missed enough payments that I was legally entitled to file charges. Instead, I offered him a choice: complete a more intensive financial rehabilitation program or face prosecution. He chose the program, which required him to surrender control of his finances to a court-appointed trustee who would ensure his debts were paid before any discretionary spending. The most unexpected development came in month 10 when Brooklyn approached me with a proposal. Jessica, I've been thinking about Dad's situation. I know you've been helping him with rent and expenses for years. I want to start contributing. Brooklyn, you still owe me over $15,000. You can't afford to help Dad yet. I've been working overtime and I got another small raise. I can afford to send Dad $100 a month starting next month. It's not much, but it's a start. This was the moment I realized Brooklyn had fundamentally changed. She wasn't just paying me back out of legal obligation, she was beginning to understand what family responsibility actually meant. True to her word, Brooklyn started sending Dad $100 monthly. She also began visiting him regularly, helping with errands and household tasks that I'd been handling alone for years. Dad was amazed by the transformation in his younger daughter. I don't know what you did to Brooklyn, he told me during one of our dinners, but she's become a completely different person. Responsible, helpful, mature. I never thought I'd see this day. By the end of year 2, Brooklyn had made significant progress on her debt and had established herself as a reliable, responsible adult. She'd been promoted to senior administrative assistant at the clinic, had saved enough money for a security deposit on a nicer apartment, and was even considering taking college courses to advance her career. Marcus completed his financial rehabilitation program and managed to get his payments back on track. While our relationship remained strictly business, he'd also shown genuine growth and accountability. The most significant change, however, was in our family dynamics. Mom initially resented the consequences I'd imposed on Brooklyn, but as she watched her younger daughter mature and take responsibility, she began to understand that enabling Brooklyn's irresponsible behavior had been hurting rather than helping her. I owe you an apology, Mom told me during a family dinner in month 18. I thought you were being too hard on Brooklyn, but you were the only one who cared enough about her future to hold her accountable. I should have supported you from the beginning. As I write this, Brooklyn has just over 2 years left on her payment plan. She's paid back more than half of what she owes, hasn't missed a payment in over a year, and has built a life she can be proud of. She recently told me she's grateful I didn't let her get away with the theft, because facing consequences forced her to become the person she never thought she could be. Marcus completed his payments 6 months early and has maintained steady employment and responsible financial habits. We don't speak regularly, but mutual friends report that he's learned from his mistakes and hasn't repeated his pattern of using others for financial gain. The most rewarding outcome wasn't the money being repaid. It was watching Brooklyn transform from an entitled, irresponsible person into someone who understands the value of hard work, financial discipline, and family loyalty. 3 years into the payment plan, Brooklyn surprised me with an unexpected phone call. She'd been accepted into A healthcare administration certification program that would significantly increase her earning potential at the clinic. But the program cost $3,500, money she didn't have while maintaining her payment obligations to me. "I know I'm not supposed to ask you for anything," she said, "but I want to propose something different. What if I take out a loan for the program? But you co-sign it? I'll still make all my regular payments to you, plus the loan payments. It would actually accelerate my ability to pay you back faster once I get the certification." This request represented a fundamental shift in our relationship. Instead of asking me to simply give her money, Brooklyn was proposing a business arrangement that would benefit both of us while advancing her career. She'd done the research, created a budget, and calculated exactly how the increased income would affect her ability to meet her obligations. After reviewing her proposal with Patricia Chen, I agreed to co-sign the loan. Brooklyn completed the certification program with honors and immediately received a promotion to Healthcare Administration Coordinator, increasing her salary by $15,000 annually. True to her word, she accelerated her payments to me and was able to pay off her entire debt 8 months early. The day Brooklyn made her final payment was emotional for both of us. She transferred the last $847 with a note that said, "Thank you for not giving up on me when I gave up on myself." But Brooklyn's growth didn't stop with completing her payments. She'd developed such strong financial discipline that she continued to live frugally even after her debt was cleared. She saved aggressively and, 4 years after the Vegas incident, achieved something that would have been unimaginable before. She bought her first house. The house was a modest 2-bedroom bungalow in East Austin, but it represented something much more significant than real estate. It was proof that someone who'd once stolen credit cards to fund a luxury vacation could build legitimate wealth through hard work and smart financial decisions. Brooklyn invited the whole family to her housewarming party. Walking through her home, seeing the furniture she'd saved for and the mortgage documents with her name as the sole borrower, I felt an incredible sense of pride. This wasn't the same person who'd manipulated Marcus into helping her steal from me. At the party, Brooklyn stood up to make a speech. 5 years ago, I was the kind of person who thought money should just appear when I wanted it. I took from the people who loved me and justified it by telling myself I deserved things I hadn't earned. Jessica could have destroyed my life with criminal charges, but instead she gave me the chance to learn what real responsibility looks like. She paused, looking directly at me. "I know I can never fully make up for the betrayal and the months of systematic theft, but I want everyone here to know that the consequences Jessica imposed on me weren't punishment. They were the greatest gift anyone ever given me. They forced me to become someone I actually respect." Marcus attended the housewarming party, bringing his fiancée, a teacher named Elena, who'd helped him maintain his financial discipline after completing his rehabilitation program. Marcus had used his experience with financial consequences to completely restructure his approach to money and relationships. "Your sister saved my life too," Marcus told me privately at the party. I was heading down a path of using people and making excuses. What happened in Vegas was rock bottom for me, but it was also the wake-up call I needed. Elena added, "Marcus told me the whole story when we started dating. I appreciated his honesty about his past mistakes, and I've watched him maintain the discipline he learned from having to pay you back. It's one of the reasons I knew he was someone I could build a future with." The ripple effects of the Vegas incident extended far beyond Brooklyn and Marcus. Dad had been so impressed by Brooklyn's transformation that he'd started examining his own financial habits. With Brooklyn's help, he'd created his first budget in decades and was working toward paying off his credit card debt. Watching Brooklyn take responsibility made me realize I needed to do the same, Dad explained during the housewarming party. I'd been letting Jessica carry the weight of helping me instead of figuring out how to improve my own situation. Mom had perhaps changed the most dramatically. She'd enrolled in financial planning courses and was working toward becoming a certified financial counselor herself. she wanted to help other families avoid the enabling patterns that had nearly destroyed our relationships. I spent years protecting Brooklyn from consequences because I thought that's what loving mothers do, Mom told the party guests. I realize now that I was actually preventing her from growing up. Jessica was the one who truly loved Brooklyn enough to demand better from her. As the evening wound down, I found myself on Brooklyn's back porch, looking out at the garden she'd planted herself. 5 years earlier, this person had been stealing my credit cards to fund a lifestyle she hadn't earned. Now she was a homeowner, a skilled professional, and someone who contributed meaningfully to our family's well-being. "Do you ever regret not pressing charges immediately?" Brooklyn asked, joining me on the porch. "Honestly, there were moments during the first year when I thought I'd made a mistake, when you missed payments or seemed to be sliding back into old patterns. But seeing who you've become, seeing how this experience changed not just you, but our whole family dynamic. No, I don't regret giving you the chance to make it right. I think about that Vegas trip sometimes," Brooklyn said. "How absolutely stupid and selfish I was. How I convinced myself that stealing from you was somehow justified because you had more money than me. The person who planned that trip feels like a stranger to me now. People can change if they're willing to do the work. You were willing to do the work." 6 months after Brooklyn's housewarming, I received an unexpected email from a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation to my attorney, Patricia. Sarah had gotten my contact information through the financial counselor who'd worked with Brooklyn. "My sister has been stealing from me for over a year," Sarah wrote. "Small amounts at first, but it escalated to thousands of dollars. I found your story through the counselor's referral network, and I'm hoping you might be willing to share advice about how you handled a similar situation." This email led to me becoming an unofficial consultant for families dealing with financial theft and betrayal. Over the next 2 years, I helped 7 different families navigate the complex emotional and legal challenges of holding family members accountable for financial crimes while preserving relationships where possible. Each case was different, but the principles remained consistent. Document everything, set clear consequences, require genuine accountability, and focus on rehabilitation rather than pure punishment when the perpetrator demonstrated sincere commitment to change. Brooklyn often participated in these consultations, sharing her perspective from the other side of the experience. Her willingness to discuss her mistakes and the process of rebuilding trust helped other families understand that change was possible with the right combination of consequences and support. The hardest part wasn't paying the money back, Brooklyn and I would tell these families. It was learning to live with the knowledge that I'd betrayed someone who loved me. But facing that shame and working through it was necessary for me to become someone worthy of trust again. These experiences led me to start a side business offering financial security consulting for families. Using my cybersecurity expertise, I helped people protect their assets from internal threats while maintaining family relationships. The business grew organically through referrals and now generates significant additional income that I've been able to invest in real estate. Looking back on that Wednesday morning when I discovered the Vegas charges, I realized that Brooklyn's theft was actually a catalyst for positive changes that extended far beyond just our family. Her crime created consequences that transformed multiple lives and even launched a new career path for me. The Vegas incident taught me that sometimes, the people we love most need us to refuse to be victims of their destructive behavior. True compassion isn't enabling someone's worst impulses. It's caring enough about their future to demand they face the consequences of their choices. Brooklyn's transformation from thief to responsible adult proved that accountability, when combined with genuine support and clear pathways to redemption, can create lasting change. She didn't just pay me back, she became someone worth believing in again. Sometimes the most important victories aren't the ones where you destroy your enemies, but the ones where you help the people who hurt you become better versions of themselves. Justice served, lessons learned, and everyone involved emerged stronger than before. Looking for more? We've got two amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.